let's get rock and rolling here.
Let's get going. And I'll tell you, I shared with our crew before you hopped on that we're doing some gut stuff tonight. So open invitation to send some questions to the chat this evening. But I think we got a couple insights maybe to start with.
Yeah, and absolutely. So for everyone here, welcome back, everyone. If you have questions tonight, inevitably, we're going to talk a lot about gut tonight. There's many questions that are revolving around it. So if you have questions, feel free to throw them out there. This literally is one of the biggest health concerns, even if it's unknown, really for every one of us. And I know my personal journey has been huge in the effect of as a result of being able to impact my gut the way that I have over the years. So yeah, so I want to dive in. We'll do some clinical insights. I have 3 different ones, and these by themselves are really interesting. Again, the clinical insights are insights that I get to have while I'm in practice. For example, today, all of these came from today. There are times when, I might have them from a week or two ago, but these all happen to have, were in my office today. And I like to share them with you just simply because to give you a little insight with our audience here of some of the things that take place that I'll see on a regular basis, but also how a lot of these are very common, or you may know someone that has something similar to this and might add a little value here. So first one is a 79-year-old male who I've known probably for the last 15 years. On and off as a patient. Last several years, I have not seen him, yet I've seen him in the community and we've always been very friendly. He's 79 years old. At 77, he fell. And when he fell, he basically tripped, stumbled forward and hit his head. And at that time, he was a pretty healthy 77-year-old. He was doing yoga on a regular basis. He played golf, lifted weights, walked, I think 3 or 4 or 5 miles a day. So very active lifestyle, very successful, an attorney who practiced for, probably 40, 50 years. So a lot of really good things. Anyways, this fall was this very defining moment. And when I say defining, I haven't seen him in my clinic for a little while. He comes in and he literally tells me this story verbatim. And I say verbatim because while he was in the office, I heard him say it 2 more times. So 3 total times. He said he tripped, fell, hit his head. As a result, he went unconscious. And ever since then, his life has changed. And these are his words. My life has changed. It's never been the same. I'm turning into an old man and I'm going down fast. As a result, he's also lost some short-term memory. And so a sequence of things kind of created this cloudy picture. So as we got chatting, I noticed that he was really, really, and this would be interesting why I'm sharing this story with you, not for the obvious reasons of like, I fixed something, I gave him a super adjustment and everything got better. That's not the moral of this story. This is a little bit different. So what I noticed that with it also came the emotions that come with having less than. Listen, every one of us is going to have an opportunity in our lives, if I guess that's what we'll call it, where all of a sudden one day things are not the same as they were before. I know I faced that a couple of times in my career. I'm 52 years old. I'm not the same guy when I go do jujitsu when I was 35 years old. There's nothing I can do about that. I still do a damn good job at 52, but it's different than when I was 35. So he was very intently talking about what had happened and going over and over and over again and how he's lost everything. He can barely practice anymore. He was still practicing at 77. He can't practice anymore. He was a litigating attorney. His memory wasn't good. And I had to interrupt him, even though I hadn't seen him in a couple of years in my office. I had to interrupt him and say, "Hey, listen, let's hold on here for a second. Let's kind of change the story a little bit and let's start moving forward. Because if you hang on to that same conversation, you have the same things." Then a little while later, I heard him say it to the staff. I don't know if you were there that day or not, but literally, he said the exact same story to me, this long played out story. And I'm sharing that part with us because this is very common that I see this in healthcare, that we have a story that we keep dragging forward with us. And that looks in a lot of different ways. And I'm going to share a couple insights with this. For some people, it's this event that happened. I fell, I broke my foot, I broke my knee, whatever. It could be anything. This gentleman fell down. And then since then, it's kind of paralyzed him in the sense that he stopped taking action. He hasn't done anything. So when I asked him, well, have you been doing physical therapy? Have you gotten any chiropractic, any massages, and I listed off about 5, 6, 7 different things. And I knew the answer to all of them. The answer was no. And I said, good. That means we have plenty of room. There's so many opportunities. And I mean this for everyone listening today. No matter what your challenge may be, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and if you feel that you have been beat down and that you're just not at your best anymore, I promise you, there are multiple things you can do. So many good technologies, so many good techniques, so many good people that are there to be supportive. Yet at some point, we got to be careful how much and how frequently we drag forward our past. So that was the first visit. And I have to be very gentle with how much of it, I call it a spanking I can give in that first visit, because I want to be open-armed and loving. But I also know the faster I can break that pattern, the quicker we can get into a healing state. So I talked to the staff about it, and they said, "Wow, my goodness, it was heavy." That he was saying it, and he talked to a couple of people in the waiting room about it, and it was heavy. And we have to be careful. So if you're listening to me right now and you say, "Man, I know someone, my brother, my mother, my sister, my friend, my spouse," they carry that story forward all the time. We have to be careful not adding on to it. And what I mean by that is that I could have been like, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe this happened." And inevitably, this particular scenario, this is turning into a lawsuit. It happened in a commercial space, the fall. So there's a whole mess to go with it. If I add to that, I'm helping him drag it forward. And this is important for all of us. I'm going to give a couple other analogies here in a moment that really kind of may sink home for the rest of us. So it's real important that we want to observe, but still love and honor that individual that's in front of us, because we don't necessarily want to make them wrong for sharing that, because maybe they feel safe in doing so. And I also believe, after all these years of listening to the stories, that when someone shares that story, they don't even know that they're doing it. Yet in some weird way, they're throwing it out, they're tossing it out there and praying that somehow, some way, you have a way to help it.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel every time I hear a story like that, I'm very acute to knowing that someone's carrying a past forward, and that never serves us until we can flip it somehow. So then
I think it's really interesting because as like humans, we want to make sure that we are connecting with folks. And so when someone brings a story to us, like so many of us have, I don't know, learned from like parents and growing up, this is the way that you, like, when someone's telling you something sad, you make these sounds and you do this thing. And ultimately, so much of what you're saying is like an opportunity to shift that mindset, can come really from anyone. Like all of us can give that space an opportunity to shift a little.
100%. You're absolutely right. It's fascinating how we do change our tone. We change our body language, just as this individual is doing. This gentleman was changing as his story was going on. His voice was getting slower and lower and deeper, and his body language was changing. And so seeing all this kind of reminded me, all right, my job now is to lead. And so for all our listeners, that's all you got to think. It's not to make the story right or wrong. It's not to bury it and say, don't think that way. None of that. It's just to lead. And my subtlety there in this particular situation was saying, awesome, you haven't done anything. That means there's a ton of room for improvement here. And immediately, so in this particular scenario, he has like a disc issue in his low back and he hasn't done anything. So I said, hey, you're in the right place. I happen to be a chiropractor. I know some stuff about this. Immediately today, we're going to create more space, get some pressure off the disc, set him up to do some sound wave therapy, got his first therapy today. And what was fascinating when he came back today, that sound wave therapy, we'll talk about that at some point. But what was fascinating, just knowing that he was going to do two things for himself today, I swear maybe I'm making it up, but he had a little pep in his step. All right. So I want to go a little farther with this, because this brought up another interesting conversation when I was hanging out with the staff today. And one of our team members was asking, well, I just had this in a different situation. I was visiting my mom, and it was the anniversary of someone passing. And it was very interesting, the whole dialogue that went, and then listen, you and I, we both lost our fathers. And that's never easy. And I know for me, I don't have an anniversary anymore, yet I have this thought that happens. There was a time there was sadness. And now it's an entirely different vibration, because I see the relationship different. I don't see what I've lost. I see day in and day out the lessons that I've learned from my father. And that subtlety right there is a mindset. And so when I was chatting with one of our team members, and one of their family members was kind of stuck in that tone, the posturing, that, oh, this is one of those days because this is the date. That's where we need to lead. And again, it's not to disrespect or dishonor anything that individual is going through, but take the opportunity to lead them into a better place. And if it is an anniversary of someone's loss, I think the best thing is to talk about what you loved about that individual the most, and it changes it like that.
Absolutely. And to have like, I think initially that can feel so comfortable to have kind of this thing that you like repeat, and ultimately like allowing for a relationship to grow even when the person is no longer like with us in the way that we first understood. There's so much more to kind of expand there when you are able to open up a little bit away from that initial kind of tale of loss, frankly.
Yeah. So that was clinical insight number one, that let's be careful and mindful, not only of our own, but maybe of the people that are in our lives, of dragging the story forward and maybe helping them give it less energy, less power, and leading them. And especially if it's yourself, think about it for a moment here. I want to throw into this, Whitney, labels. This just kind of came to me. Labels that we get from healthcare providers when they say, you got the boogly woogly disease, you got this, you got that, you got scoliosis, you got Hashimoto's, you have an autoimmune condition, whatever it may be. I think we also have to be very, very careful, because remember, the name of the game in healthcare, and I'm not frowning upon the healthcare practitioners, but the name of the game is to name it, then blame it. And then we can either medicate it or cut it. That is the game. And we have to be very, very careful, because it does nothing for empowerment of, if someone said, oh, you have Hashimoto's disease. So, and then understanding, oh, there's an autoimmune condition. What happens is my cells are fighting themselves. If I don't want them to fight themselves, I stop putting the things in them that inflame them. So there's a lot of things we can do no matter what the name is. And that's one of the things I love about the way that I get to practice every day, this holistic approach or functional medicine, whatever you want to call it, when we get to root causes and we look at it, things from the inside out. So I'm going to throw that right in there about carrying the past forward, including the names and the blames that we carry forward.
I'd love to also just share one that we learned from you. We use it a lot in the office when someone comes in and they've got something that they're sharing, and we're happy to hold that space. Yet, an invitation that we tend to give is like, cool, like, what did you learn from that experience? Like, where did you grow from there?
Yeah. And oh man, I think anytime someone asks you about that question about anything, it's real. Like in that moment, you get to actually interpret what you've just learned or experienced in life. So thank you for that. That's phenomenal. I'm a really smart person, whoever shared that with you. All right. So let me dig into the second clinical insight. And this one's a little bit different. This is really kind of interesting, fascinating case. 62-year-old female, smaller little lady. She just has grandma, like that's her label. Like you picture, you're like, this is a sweet little grandma. That's how I want everyone to picture this little lady. She practices yoga with us, very active. And in December, she fell down in her bathroom and hit her head and got a concussion. Didn't know how she blacked out. So immediately, if that happens clinically, we're thinking, well, we might have had a stroke, and we got to make sure that we rule out a brain bleed or a blood brain bleed, which she was able to rule out. So that's the good news. But she was very disorientated. She was conscious enough to call her daughter. And when she did call her daughter, she was conscious enough to call her, but unable to speak. So of course the daughter was like, well, we're calling 911. They got 911 to her. They bring her to a hospital, which she ends up staying for 4 days. And here's the interesting part about this. When she was in the hospital, and the reason I shared with you that she looks like this little old grandmother, she had to be restrained. They had to put her in restraints and hold her down because she was attacking her nurses and her doctors. She was ripping her IVs out of her body and she was going after them. And she's like, no one could figure out why I did that. I've never been violent. I don't have any anger. And she's just this peaceful little sweet grandma looking lady, which is awesome. And I have seen this before. And I said, and she was really puzzled and she had all these aches and pains. She's like, someone said, I should just come in and talk with you, get checked out. And she's in the side. The other thing that's since then, she's not sleeping. really erratic sleeping patterns, sleeps for about 2 hours at a time, wakes up, but then can fall asleep at about 4 a.m. And that's pretty consistent. So as I told my little grandmother, and I was so glad I was able to, I help identify this, and we'll see over the next couple of weeks. I expect good results. What happens when we have a trauma, and this can apply to any trauma. So again, just kind of take this in and interpret it as you need, or let it sit where it needs to go. When we have a trauma, physical, chemical, emotional, we go through a very stressful situation. You have what's called a fight or flight response. We often forget about the fight. She had a trauma, and her fight or flight response ended up in fight. Her nervous system was completely wound up when it was in defense mode. She went into fight. And that's all it was. And it was unfortunate no one described that to her, because it was really hanging over her head. She thought maybe deep down she's got a lot of anger or just holding things in, which I didn't really see any of that. And to see it kind of like shut off when I said, yeah, this is just a classic case of there's really fight, flight, or freeze. And in this situation, it was full out fight. And she's still stuck in this. After we have, especially a physical trauma like that, a head blow or a trauma to the head, the whole body ends up in fight or flight, and that nervous system gets stuck like that. So if you've ever had, whether it be a car accident, you got your boots knocked off, you're playing football or something. When you have a trauma, your body often will hold on to part of that fight or flight state, fight, flight, freeze, until intentionally taking back out. And that might be an acupuncture session. It might be it might be meditation, but something that really swings that pendulum. And today, giving her some reassurance emotionally, saying, yes, this is a fight or flight situation. You were in fight. And what really happens there, Whitney, is there becomes a disorganization with your hypothalamus pituitary gland. And that's the mother of our hormones. That's the one that's really going to give us our acting hormones on any given moment. The one that's telling us to surge cortisol or testosterone or these fight or flight, other types of hormones. So her knowing that, we gave her some supplementation, very much geared for the hypothalamus, which she was really excited about. Anytime there's a head trauma, listen, this is anyone. I don't care if you got a 10-year-old daughter that hits a soccer ball with her head, which is really one of the number one ways that girls get concussions is playing soccer. Any head trauma, you got to take care of that. And there's very specific supplementation. And no matter what it is, how small it is, because the brain does not have the same healing capacities like if you bruise your shoulder or your arm. So it doesn't shut off. A lot of that inflammatory processes continue. So little kind of oddball situation there. Yet she was stuck in fight. Not uncommon. She's not a bad human being. She's still the sweet little old grandmother that she's always been. And now she understands what happened. And it looks like she's going to have a full recovery, which is literally beautiful.
That's the best news. And I really think all of us can identify that when we have like a stressful moment. And there's nothing, I think, wrong about having a fight, flight, or freeze response, because that's like our body's natural way of protecting us when there's something coming. The important piece, as you mentioned, is like the transition out of that, the reassurance that like, okay, this moment has passed and we no longer need to be in this state.
Yeah, and I think I would add to that because you're absolutely right, that is the natural response when we feel threatened. To take that on another level of just through our journey of health here is to recognize how often on a daily basis do you feel some type of threat emotionally, physically, chemically, and are you helping your body swing the pendulum? And hopefully there are practices that you have. Maybe you practice yoga 3 days a week. Maybe you meditate every single morning. When I think about that, I think, yeah, there's probably plenty of times a day that my body goes into that on a daily basis that kind of gets wound up and then I have to release. And it could be literally someone just cutting you off. So I think giving some thought to the idea of, do I get wound up? Because it will compound the interest of the attention that builds up if it's not released. So like you said, it is definitely a natural response when we feel threatened by anything. One of the things that I always think about is going through divorce, that we're in that fight the full time. I haven't been through divorce, but I've watched so many people go through it, and they think when it's over, and they're going to feel better. It's usually when they feel the worst, because that's a fight or flight situation. They're in, most often they are in fight mode for sometimes, years. So kind of consider all of those different things. And then also think about, well, what can I do personally? Do I need go get myself a good massage? Do I need to go do an acupuncture session? Do I need some therapy? Whatever it may be.
And with that in mind, Bart, are there like specific supplements that you might recommend for someone who's recognizing they've got like a regular kind of stress response throughout the day?
My favorite one, and which I gave to her today, is ashwagandha. Yeah. So other than the trauma part so not for that, but the ashwagandha is probably one of the most consistently beneficial herbs across the board for many, many things, but especially helping out the HP axis. So it really helps regulate the hypothalamus and the adrenal axis. In that HPA, hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, that's where we have a lot of that angst built up, especially if we're repeatedly putting ourselves in stressful situations. So ashwagandha is an amazing, gentle little, we call it, Disney in a bottle often. It's just a great, great herb. And the beauty about that herb is that it's very calming. It's an adaptogen herb, and you can use it as you need it. Where some others, you really have to get into the system and the build up before they become effective. Where ashwagandha, it's effective the day you use it, which is wonderful. Usually each individual's dosage needs are different, and it's not always by weight. That's a little bit different. Herbs are often different in their dosing relative to vitamins and minerals. So vitamins and minerals are like food supplies, and those are very relative to the size of the body. So you need a certain amount of magnesium in your body based on how big you are. Herbs are really going to work with the energetic body a little bit more, especially when we're talking about things like ashwagandha or kava, or heck, even Korean ginseng. They are teetering with what you're giving to them energetically. And I often give the example how my wife and my needs for kava, I love kava. Kava is the chill out herb. It's probably the single best herb if people are dealing with anxiety and stuff. That for me, I can take one and it takes the edge off of things. Two, I'm hitting the couch and I'm most likely falling asleep shortly. If I have to sleep and I want zombie type sleep, I'll take 3 of them. My deep sleep on my Oura ring goes through the roof. It's absolutely phenomenal. So 1, effective for me. 2 is really my sweet spot. My wife often needs much more, and I'm 50 pounds heavier than her. And it's just your nervous system really dictates a lot of how functional the herbs become on individuals. So I don't know if I've really explained that much on our show here, but herbs and vitamins and minerals, definitely different. And practicing with them is actually kind of the way to do it.
It's such a cool reminder. And just knowing that like these herbs are as close to our like energy cells as they kind of can be. I am a daily ashwagandha user. And if I have more stuff going on, I take up my ashwagandha a little bit. And if everything is pretty chill, then I like take it a little down. And I love observing my own energy and kind of noticing how I respond accordingly.
Yeah, and that's the beauty. There's a practice, just like anything else in health, knowing how hard we can go on our yoga mat or go for a run, et cetera. All right, I'm going to keep rocking and rolling here. So the next one is almost a tale of 2 stories. 2 different young girls, one's 14, one's 18, and they both have cystic acne. And no wrong or rights here, but I want to share. Really, we can end up in different directions. So the one girl is headed off to college, has super anxiety and real bad acne. Again, healthy. I think just all young people to me are just like these healthy, young, vibrant souls. Her skin, even when I started, I said, yeah, I agree. That doesn't look good. I wasn't going to sugarcoat it at all. So you're absolutely right. Your skin should look like that, super inflamed, and that's what it is. It's cystic acne, especially is an inflammatory process. And quite frankly, cystic acne. Listen, if you or anyone out there, you guys are listening, we've got it so dialed in now on essentially how effective we can be in helping get rid of it. I dealt with a lot of acne when I was young. If someone told me that there was take this and do this, I tried all that. I was taking every cream and lotion and potion. No one ever told me to get off gluten dairy. No one ever told my mom that. And no one ever told me that stress impacts all this stuff. So anyways, 2 young girls, almost the identical situations, going off to school, a lot of social pressures. And there are a lot of social pressures, I think, especially for youngsters. and they're going through their hormones, and it has this double down. For the young girls specifically, little sidestep here on cystic acne, part of what happens is that their testosterone goes too high, and it starts to get converted into something called DHT, which is another form of testosterone. And that's part of what causes the acne. So that's one level. And it's relatively easily to manage that part of it, to downregulate the testosterone by eating lots of cruciferous vegetables. And there are different supplements you could use, but really that's it. Broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, kale. Those would literally start to pull that excess testosterone out of the liver so your body doesn't end up expressing it differently. And then there's a couple other things, but these are musts. They're not options. Got to go gluten-free, and we got to go dairy-free. You can still get away with organic cheeses, but you got to get all the dairy out. And that's where we ran into problems. So the one girl, she wanted, and this is a key here, there's a big difference between wanting and needing, or wanting and hoping. The one girl flat out, I could have told her to stand on her head. She was going to stand on her head. She trusted that I had a direction, and she was going to follow that. And if it was going to help her get rid of her acne, she was going to do it. And to a T, she followed it. She got rid of the gluten and dairy. Immediate changes within a week. She started to know less inflammation, less pain with her acne, which is fantastic. We downregulated the inflammation right away. She wasn't doing a great job with all the vegetables, so we supplemented it. It's just something we use called Cruciferous Complete. She was honest about it. And I asked her, what's the chance you eating broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, or kale? One of those every single day. She said, not good. All right, fair enough. We're just going to supplement it. No big deal. That helps purge out the excess testosterone, high testosterone. We did a couple other things, add the B vitamins, and then we add some specific stuff for the skin. Can't forget about healing up the skin as well. All of them from the inside out, working on a little bit of gut health as well. Exact same situation, another young girl. And the challenge here is this. She didn't want to do it. She knew she needed to do it, but did not want to do it. And her surrounding cast, her mom, who cooks for the 14-year-old, continuously complained on how hard it was. And it broke my heart, because I kept thinking that if she only knew how good her daughter would feel inside if she could look in the mirror and feel better about herself. And I know the challenges there are to go from literally removing gluten out of your life. In this particular scenario, the mom literally made pasta every night, which is gluten orientated. And we addressed it, said, listen, the good news is there are gluten-free pastas everywhere. There's gluten-free pizza everywhere. I'm not saying they're the best foods for you, but there's options. So unfortunately, before she even started taking the supplement, said it was too hard. Didn't even buy them, didn't even get them. Before she even changed her diet, and I begged her, pleaded her. I felt it on the other side. And I was trying to use all my Jedi mind tricks, but the mom was the one telling me how hard it was, and she hadn't even done it yet. And I begged her to come to our cafe, Prima, where we have 100% organic, 100% gluten-free, 100% soy-free, 100% canola oil-free. I didn't even talk about the soy and canola. Those can be contributing factors to inflammation as well. And I just asked her to go in there and tell your daughter to throw a dart, anything. Get a scone, get a cookie, get a peanut butter ball, get a smoothie, get a salad, anything. And that would work. And they kind of stopped before they even started. So that's the tale of two stories there. There's a big difference in wanting to do something. When we want to do something, we figure it out. Needing to do it feels forced. And it's never fun. And it often will feel like food jail. And I never want anyone to be in food jail. And I say that with most of what I do privates, we'll do like a Zoom setting like this. And I'll often tell them, I never want you to feel like you're in food jail. I just want you to want these foods because they're going to make you feel and be awesome. So that's kind of the two tales. I still do believe that we plant the seed, certainly courteous, and I'm using every mind trick, and we're going to follow up and follow through, and we're going to do everything we can from our side of it, from, the business side of it, clinically, to help this mom and daughter. And there's a big stressor there. The parents are separated, huge, hard to heal a gut. If you got stress in your life. Actually, it's impossible to fully heal a gut with stress in your life, predominant stress. But knowing what's on the table now, if we just plant the seed, so maybe it's not today, but maybe it'll be in 4 or 5, 6 months, or maybe in 3 years. I don't know.
And I think those impacts are so long lasting, Bart, and it's such a cool part of being with your practice that oftentimes we have the opportunity to introduce some relatively simple ideas to folks who have tried tons of other things. And oftentimes these changes that we may never heard of, like you growing up and just never recognized that like diet could be a contributor to the things you were like experiencing, having the capacity to trust and try, everything is possible after that.
Hey man, action's literally a medicine. It is, because it it gives us experience. It gives us another option. It gives us something to say yes or no, and that's the power of if anyone's stuck in anything, just realize that just action is part of the medicine, and inevitably we'll have to fail at some action. So both of them had been on medications already. That's typically the case. I usually get them at the end, where they've tried things and they've worked temporarily. And typically when they do go on the different medications, they have a holiday where they work anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And then unfortunately it backfires and sometimes it gets a little bit worse. Yeah, but nonetheless, that's where we were. That's where we are.
So if anyone had someone in their life or maybe themselves who wanted to kind of chat with you, something going on with them, would they have to be local here? Could we reach them elsewhere?
Easy breezy. Anybody from anywhere. All they need to do with call, send a message, email to the office. We can set up a Zoom very similar to this. We can also send out lab requisites if need be. So you don't have to be local. That's the beauty of the last couple of years here. Things like, Zoom and other methods like this, where we can do things online, is fantastic. And most of these cases that I'm talking about, well, not the first two, but the last two, the two young girls, they were both Zooms. They weren't even in office.
That's so awesome. Well, I just popped that into the chat. We've got our phone number and email address, and I also put a little link for that ashwagandha we were talking about earlier, that calming herb. While we're thinking about herbs, can I ask you an herb question?
Yeah, let's do it.
Amazing. So what would be like a great herb for circulation?
So there's probably two that come right to my mind. Surprisingly, the very first one is ginkgo.
Awesome.
One of the reasons that ginkgo is so phenomenal, one of the reasons it's probably most known for increasing memory. The reason it does that is because it's really what it does. The mechanism is through microcirculation. So it increases the microcirculation in the brain. If your brain has more blood, it functions better. So for people that need circulation, maybe they're getting varicose veins, spider veins, they're just feeling like their flow isn't good. It's a combination. If they really need better circulation, make sure to reduce anything that's inflammatory, and then using herbs like, like I said, their ginkgo. The other one is probably one that I utilize a little bit more for my own life, and it's gotu kola. I love that herb. It's not as popular, I don't think, yet it does amazing. And in the herbal world, we call it Botox in a bottle. It's literally fantastic. I use it and it helps the collagen in your skin bind. So it makes your skin stronger. Really fascinating herb, one of my favorites. So if you've torn a muscle, a hamstring, you've had an Achilles tear, all of that, you've had cosmetic surgeries, you want your tissue to bind and connect properly. So it doesn't require because of the microcirculation impact, you have less scar tissue. And that's exactly what we want. The reason I used it is, I do martial arts, I do silly things, and sometimes I get punched. And what I was finding was that I started just the littlest nicks, I would get cut easier. And I was bleeding easier because my skin was, and it can happen as we age, your collagen starts to break down. So, inevitably I start taking copious amounts of collagen for my skin, but also for my gut. And then this gotu kola herb, and it started to really strengthen things up, where I feel like where my skin was 7 years ago in terms of being able to absorb, a blow or a cut from my dog's nails or something, it's much better, much stronger now. So gotu kola. And the thing about gotu kola and ginkgo, those herbs, it's not about how much you take, it's the consistency. So using them over longer periods of time, because in those situations for both of them, microcirculation is the goal here. And that's what is the real true benefit there.
That's so awesome. And like Botox in a bottle, I don't know anyone who would not love to have that natural from the earth. Love it.
Yes.
All right, Bart. I have gathered a bunch of our best gut questions from the crew and the crowd. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's dig in. We'll have to do a speed round here. Let's do it.
All right, here goes the speed round. So, first and foremost, could we test for leaky gut? I know it's something we talk about a good bit through this practice, this show.
The answer is yes, in a roundabout way. So leaky gut is no doubt on the top of the list of this kind of, well, what is it? And there are ways to test. So I'll do my best to kind of give a simple explanation. So we get leaky gut when things come into our body. So I'm gonna for those of you who can't see, I'm holding my hand up and I'm putting all my fingers together, so it's solid. And you can't see through my fingers. What happens in leaky gut is my fingers start to spread apart and things literally can slip through my fingers. That would be equivalent to the lining wall of your stomach. And that it actually pulses a little bit, letting some things through intentionally and closing it down, opening up, closing it down. Well, leaky gut happens when we have something. So what makes that open and down? There's something that signals, and it's a protein molecule called zonulin. You don't have to know what that is, but zonulin is this little messenger that tells to open and close and open and close. If you have too much zonulin, it opens up. When we eat foods, specifically, number one is gluten. Gluten enhances the amount of zonulin your body releases big time. And you create these super high levels of zonulin and you end up opening these what's called tight junctions. They're no longer tight and things get through one side of the intestinal wall to the other. That's what they call permeability. It have too much permeability. Now, can they be tested? The answer is yes. There's a bunch of different tests out there. So I want to explain this to make it so, this is the Health Made Simple show, so I'm going to try to make this simple. Any signs, if you've ever been diagnosed with anything, or if you have bloating, if you've been diagnosed with SIBO, you have dysbiosis, if you have irritable bowel syndrome, if you have Crohn's, if you have diverticulitis, if you have Hashimoto's, if you have an autoimmune disease, and now we just put in millions and millions of people. Most likely, solid chance you have some level of leaky gut currently. It always creates an inflammatory response, and a lot of times you don't know because you're just walking around inflamed. That being said, there are tests. So you can do a food sensitivity test, and some of those food sensitivity tests will include a gut permeability test and or a zonulin test. And most of the times, I'll just tell you high or low. What I typically tell my clients is, if you've had any of those symptoms, you get bloated, anything that I just mentioned there, brain fog, you find yourself tired after eating, any of those situations, most likely you have leaky gut. Most of us literally walk around with it from early on in our lives. And how do I know, or how do kids have leaky gut? This is a deep dive yet. There are two things that's the two most damaging to the gut lining. It will be one, gluten. And gluten's a double whammy because it enhances or increases the amount of zonulin you produce, which opens up those tight junctions. Now things get to go right through. They're supposed to be on the inside, and now they're getting through to the outside. Your body sees them on the outside into the bloodstream. They create an immune response. Now we're inflamed. That's number one. Glyphosate. Glyphosate's a chemical that we found in Roundup, and it's all over all our foods. I think right now there's a recent research that just came out. They checked like 2,000 foods, Whitney, and 60% of them had glyphosate. They're not supposed to have any.
Oh no.
Yeah,
I don't love to hear that at all.
Yeah, so they're everywhere. They're in all kinds of food, and that glyphosate damages that wall. So now we have two bad. So we won't go too deep dive into this yet. When we think about what are one of the most common snacks a little kid gets, I'm talking a toddler, infant. You got the little clear plastic bag, little sandwich bag filled with what? Cheerios. And what is that? It is gluten and it's glyphosate all over it. That's the real deal. And the Cheerios that they're eating today, yes, they are significantly different than the Cheerios that I grew up on. The wheat content is different. The gluten content is different. There's been so much reorganization and inbreeding of the wheat and the gluten that the amount of gluten that is available in today's wheat is 100 to 500 times more than it used to be. So when people say, well, how did we used to eat these things? We used to eat them because it was different. And those glyphosate has probably only been in our foods now for 15 to 18 years. So the answer is, can we test for leaky gut? Yes. Understanding leaky gut is probably more important. So whether you test for it or not, act as if you have it. Clean up your gut. And this is part of what I'm talking about down in Orlando. This is one of the most significant things. Quite frankly, I think these last couple of years being a pandemic, one of the big reasons our guts are so messed up. We know that 70% of our immune system lies in our gut. With 90% of the neurotransmitter serotonin is made in your gut. That is your happy hormone. That is the one that makes you have glee and smile every day. And if our guts are that messed up and that hormone needs to be made in your gut, no wonders we're walking around a bunch of medicated zombies.
Yeah. And to just take like one action to help the gut heal a little bit quicker is just wiping the gluten off to the side. So if you're not fortunate enough to get to come visit us at Prema, there's all sorts of things you can explore, like wherever you live, right?
There really is. Any grocery store, well, I shouldn't say any, the majority of grocery stores across the United States, again, I'm probably generalizing here because I go to some towns, there's no chance that there's organic in it. Yet, I know down here, every grocery store has gluten-free options. Every pizza shop at this point has gluten-free options. So it's not just a thing for the health people anymore, which is cool. I want to go back just a bit about the testing room. Sometimes there's a little confusion about what we call the IgG and IgE. And I'll explain that real quickly because that's part of what's being tested in when we test food sensitivities. We run food sensitivity tests at Balance. You do a little finger prick. If anyone's ever done any one of these before, you know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of different good companies out there that do it. You do a finger prick. It's a blood spot. You send it in. It sends you back a list of all the foods that you're sensitive to. These are not allergies. An IgE is an allergy. And the difference here, you eat it and boom, there's a response. Anaphylactic response. You have essentially a cytokine storm. We heard a lot about that during COVID. What's called a cytokine storm. It's an overwhelming inflammatory response. That's what we see when people have allergies to like peanuts and stuff like that. An IgG response is a food sensitivity. And this is the key. And this is what the challenge is often. Often an IgG response is delayed, which means not just delayed for a couple hours or when you get home after your meal. It might be delayed for a day or two or three. And that's where the brain fog happens. That's where the fatigue happens. That's where the appetite goes through the roof because you're not getting your nutrients because your body's inflamed. So the IgG, the food sensitivity part of it, is a delayed response. And therefore, that's when people talk to me about gluten, I'll usually tell them it's very much like being pregnant. There's no kind of sort of, you either are or you're not. You cannot kind of go gluten-free because that gluten response can create inflammation anywhere from 30 to 100 days.
The log tail of it. Yes. Well, there is power in the shift, right? Taking action is it. Are you ready for the second question, speed round?
Yes. Yeah, we're not doing too good. We're not doing too good on the speed, are we?
We're going to pick it up. We're going to pick it up right now.
Here we go.
All right. So here is a question. I have gone gluten-free for 8 weeks. It's really seemed to help with bloating and brain fog. When is it safe to start eating again?
All right, here's a simple answers. Never. There's no healthy gluten in our country, and I'm going to be specific about that. There's no healthy gluten in our country. So when you bring it back, your body will recognize it as a bad guy, and it still has an immune response. So it's as if your body has recognized who the bad guys are. And the moment you have it, it has a full-blown red alarm system. What's fascinating here, I'm going to make this one quick. If you travel to Italy, which I have not, and you eat gluten over there, people come back and be like, Doc, I ate bread my entire vacation. I felt fine. I didn't bloat. What happened? What's the difference? It's different. Literally, we have what's called, I believe it's called a hard wheat. And it's like a red hard wheat. And it's been obviously manipulated multiple times, different genes put together, et cetera. And the amount of gluten, I'm just going to give you an analogy. If I had this pen here in my hand, the top of my pen, that used to be the amount of gluten on a wheat stalk. Now in our country, the gluten is probably the majority of this pen, and it's just all the way down to here. So now all of that is the gluten. So we have literally 100 to 500% more gluten. And over in Italy, it's just the top of the pen. So our body can handle it. And it's about the dosing and the frequency. So, all right, that was question number 2 done. So the answer is never. Go back. Just keep doing good foods. And the truth is, there's no value, there's no nutrients in gluten. Feeling better is a lot better than just the momentary like funness of like having a pizza or something. And there's so many different options.
So many different options, so many pizzas these days. I love that you mentioned that. Gluten-free pizzas all over. Adjacent to question 2, we just had a question this evening from Lori. So if you had someone who was like experiencing IBS for a couple years, diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis recently, her hope is that fixing her gut will fix the rheumatoid arthritis. Could you speak a little bit to that as well?
Of course. And of course, we're not diagnosing or treating anyone here. Yet the answer, Lori, is yes, go for it. It's a go deep dive. That rheumatoid is considered an autoimmune condition, and an autoimmune condition has a link back to leaky gut. I promise you that. You clean up that gut, you will harness what's taking place with that rheumatoid. It's a little bit of a journey, yet I tell you what, it's easier now than ever. For me, clinically, it's something that I've been trying to help people probably for the last 10, 12, 15 years. And it's so much more dialed in now. It's very strategic, and the options are so much easier right now to heal up the gut. So 100%, if you had IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, no doubt about it, you're not absorbing your nutrients. I don't know what episode it is. We did a show a while ago, the 4 R's of healing. If you get a chance, listen to that one. That will dial it in for you, and I would be happy to help. If you want someone to guide you through that, we can do that as well.
That is awesome. Let me see if I can find that for us. Thank you so much, Lori. All right, Bart, does using birth control impact gut health?
Yeah, it's come to a surprise for a lot of people. The answer is yes. There's a lot of research out there right now that birth control breaks down the microbiome. And that's a tough one. So, and again, I'm not telling you to come on or off birth control. It's if you're on birth control for any other reason than to avoid pregnancy, I would at least give it strong consideration of coming off it. Whatever it is, other than avoiding, listen, for pregnancy, that's what it should be there for. But if it's there for acne, if it's there for hormone balance, any of those other things, you're just burying the root cause. So, and yes, birth control always disrupts microbiome. So great question. And the answer is simple yes. If you have to stay on it, then learn everything you need to do to be very, very supportive of your gut, like bone broth every day, getting L-glutamine, that's what's in bone broth, making sure that you're getting all the foods that help clean up and get rid of, obviously, the gluten and dairy. So everything that's proactive for your gut, knowing that there's always going to be this one thing that's kind of breaking it down. But if you do all those proactive things, you'll do just fine.
That's so awesome. It's really an invitation to take agency for our health, right? Like know what's going in and why.
Yeah. And also there's things, sometimes we just have things going on that we know are going to be semi-destructive. And if we just learn about them and like, all right, this is what I do. And right now, for whatever reasons, I'm not going to stop that. Whatever those reasons may be. Maybe you're smoking, maybe you're drinking, I don't know. Maybe taking birth control. But for whatever reason, at this point in your life, you're not going to shift away from that. Be wise, know that weak link, and then strengthen the other side, the other part of that. And that's the beauty of it. Those choices, those actions, we can really swing the pendulum because our bodies are so amazing that it is an and world. You can have that and do a ton of things for your health and do just fine.
That's awesome. So you can do martial arts and heal your cuts at the same time, right?
Bingo, you got it.
That's it.
Yeah.
All right, next question. So I think some of us may know what this feels like. Why am I bloated even if I don't eat anything?
Bloating happened for a couple different reasons. The primary reasons because there's something what we call dysbiosis. That's a fancy kind of clinical term that means your gut bacteria are out of balance. So we have good and bad bacteria. I like to use the relationship of like your lawn. And in your lawn, you have grass, and then you got the weeds. And no matter what happens, it seems like those weeds want to grow faster and stronger and just keep growing and keep growing. Our good bacteria try to keep them in check. Somewhere along the way, we can beat up our grass. We can beat up our own good bacteria in our gut. And often that may look like birth control. It can look like other medications and steroids. Antibiotics are a big boomer on it. Glyphosate will break down your own bacteria. And then what happens When we're constantly bringing these different sources of chemicals in our body and beating up our own good bacteria, our bad bacteria overgrow. And then it starts to overgrow, especially in the lower part of our GI system, like the large intestine. And there's a certain pH or a certain gas that is created by that bacteria. And then over time, that gas starts to leak up into the small intestine. And that creates this bloating effect. There's a name for that. They call that small intestine bacterial overgrowth. And it's kind of like for many people, they'll literally look as if they're having a baby, even though they're not having one. They may have eaten nothing. So that's component number one, gut imbalance, everything we've just talked about. Go back to very first stages here. You got to remove all the things that are creating the inflammation. In this one specifically, you must start with the gut healing, we call it R1. We got to remove everything. And we also have to get really good at breaking our foods back down. So adding a little bit of like hydrochloric acid, super helpful here. The second part of this, Whitney, is stress. Stress is an X factor. I think I just whispered a little while ago that if we have stress, very difficult, almost impossible to have a balanced gut. Our gut-brain connection is absolutely huge. And when we are under a lot of stress, your body goes into fight or flight and you release different chemicals. You end up with a different pH, you have different acid levels, and especially if it's prolonged stress. So that could be part of it as well. And of course, when part of our gut healing program, the fourth phase of it is rebalancing. And that is making a specific steps toward creating some harmony in our lives. A little bit of meditation, or maybe a morning ritual, maybe, an evening ritual, something to calm the pendulum back down, get the pendulum to swing back in our favor. So the bloating certainly does happen. I've been there before. I think all these symptoms have been there. And a lot of people can recognize the bloating. It's uncomfortable, and unfortunately learn to live with it. There's strange things that go on with bloating sometimes. When you're bloated, you also have malnutrition. This is what a lot of people don't understand, that the individual who has the bloating, they're bloated. And sometimes, I know this individual asked why even without eating, that's typically a small intestine bacterial overgrowth. A lot of people who are bloated keep eating, even though they're absolutely full. And that's a sign that we have malnutrition, that's saying that we are what we eat. There's a level of accuracy there. More accurate is we are what we absorb.
And even the practice of like eating when you're in that state is more stress, isn't it? Stress affecting everything.
Yeah, spot on there. So you think about our culture right now, or just on a daily basis, we are often eating, maybe it's just me, but maybe with a phone in one hand and eating with the other.
You might not be alone.
Yeah, might not be alone. We see it, we're all guilty of it. But in that moment, there's no way that our, the system, the parasympathetic system, which is responsible for rest and digest, it's just not engaged. You're still thinking, you're reading email, responding to a text. That is the opposite. That's sympathetic dominance. Go and get it. So you're moving and grooving, and you don't even release the right enzymes. And therefore, later in the day, you fill up with these gas. And so again, the whole picture here, heal up the gut, get rid of the bad guys, replace the ones that we're missing, repair any of the damaged areas. Often that means you got to regrow the garden, and then we got to rebalance the lifestyle. So again, if you're bloating, happy to help. And check out that podcast that we did about the 4 R's, how to heal up the gut.
That's awesome. And I just want to say, since you mentioned the hydrochloric acid, what would be like a great source for that?
My favorite source is something we use called Zypan. And really what that's doing, Whitney, is we essentially put a strong scent. We bring in acid, hydrochloric acid, which is something your body naturally has. Over time and through lots of stress and poor foods, et cetera, we use it up and you don't produce quite as much. So adding it as a supplement, super beneficial to become a better digester. A lot of people, that single supplement is a game changer. And oftentimes you don't have to go and change all the other things. Sometimes you just need to digest your food better, and that will literally make changes in your life.
Yeah, every day. All right, we got a couple of moments left here. So we touched on this a little bit earlier, but just to make sure and revisit, does acne correlate to gut health? I know we had that case of the 2 paths.
Yes, the answer is yes. So we started off with the clinical insight of the 2 different paths there, and the answer is absolutely, positively. And so when it comes to acne, think of skin in our, whatever we see on our skin is a reflection of what's going on inside our gut. So that could also throw in things like psoriasis and eczema, all of those different things. If you see something going on with the skin, think gut first. That is, the acne will not be cured from the outside in. There are some situations, some medications sometimes that downregulate and you override your hormonal system, and you'll see some changes in the acne there because of the high testosterones, but it's not a long-term game. You clean up the gut, the gluten and the dairy must go in those scenarios. And really what's taking place, you're downregulating inflammation. Acne is an inflammatory process. Very, very rarely, like 1 out of 1,000, is it because you're just too dirty. It's not a matter of using the wrong cleaner or not cleaned up enough. Our bodies have amazing ways to just clean and cleanse themselves. So we don't need to continuously put all that stuff on our body just, to eliminate acne. That's an inside out job.
That's so clear. Well, I think we have we've hit quite a few, Bart. I think we did pretty good speed round style.
We did. We sped it up. We knocked it out.
I think we are at our favorite question, our last question of the evening. Bart, what is one action that our listeners can take towards becoming superhuman?
To make an observation if you're carrying anything forward. So it's kind of an action, but more of an observation. So often I see labels and names and diagnoses and stories that we carry forward that are literally like Superman carrying around kryptonite. So let's get rid of the kryptonite. Let's be, real honest with ourselves and see where we might be dragging things forward. That the faster we let go of it, the better we become. So that's going to be my one insight of how to become superhuman faster. Find out what your kryptonite is, let that stuff go, let it, land wherever it needs to land, and move on to being the best version of yourself.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for another awesome episode here, Health Made Simple show.
And thank you, of course, and to all our listeners. Appreciate and love you guys. Keep doing the thing, keep sharing it out, keep spreading the love. We literally don't know that one individual who might get to hear one little nugget or do something that ends up changing their life and makes a big impact in their life. So keep doing the thing, keep sharing it out, keep spreading love. And of course, we're going to continue to take deliberate action for our mind, our body's overall wellness. Y'all be awesome.